Loneliness and solitude are often mistaken for each other, but they are not the same thing. Loneliness is a feeling of emptiness, of being disconnected from others, of craving connection that feels just out of reach. Solitude, on the other hand, is a choice. It's the act of being alone without feeling abandoned. When you understand this difference, you begin to see that solitude isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. The problem is that we've been conditioned to see being alone as a weakness, as if the absence of others means there's something wrong with us. But solitude isn't a punishment. It's an invitation to meet yourself fully without distraction. Think about the moments when you've felt lonely. The quiet ache of being surrounded by people but feeling completely unseen. That hollow space when you realize no one has reached out and the silence begins to feel heavy. That's loneliness. Loneliness is tied to the need for validation, for connection, for someone else to remind you that you matter. But solitude is different. Solitude is when you sit alone, not because no one's there, but because you've chosen to be with yourself. It's the decision to face your thoughts, your feelings, and your reality without running from them. It's not about needing someone to fill the silence. It's about learning to be comfortable in that silence. It's easy to fill the quiet with noise. Social media, conversations, background music. It all gives the illusion of connection. But real connection doesn't come from the noise. It comes from knowing who you are when the noise fades away. When you sit with yourself in stillness, you learn things about yourself that you'd never hear over the sound of distraction. You begin to understand your patterns, your fears, and your desires. The clarity that comes from solitude isn't available when you're constantly surrounded by external input. That's why solitude is powerful. It strips away the noise and forces you to see yourself as you really are. There's strength in solitude because it teaches you how to stand on your own. When you rely on other people to fill the emotional gaps in your life, you give away your power. You become dependent on others to feel whole, to feel valued. But when you learn to sit with yourself, to be your own source of validation, you reclaim that power. You stop looking for approval from the outside because you've already found it within yourself. That's the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is searching for something external to fill a void. Solitude is knowing that you are already enough. It's not easy at first. Sitting alone with your thoughts can feel uncomfortable, even painful. The mind will start digging up old memories, insecurities, and regrets. But that's where the real work happens. Facing those thoughts without distraction, without numbing yourself, is how you grow. Solitude creates the space for healing. When you stop running from discomfort and meet it head-on, you realize it's not as overwhelming as it seemed. The strength you build from sitting with yourself in difficult moments translates into every other part of your life. You become emotionally grounded because you've learned how to hold yourself steady even when things feel chaotic. Some of the most profound insights in life come when you're alone. That's when you hear your own voice most clearly. It's easy to lose yourself when you're constantly surrounded by others' opinions and expectations. Solitude gives you the space to strip all of that away and ask yourself, what do I truly want? Who am I when no one's watching? That's where true strength lies, not in pleasing others or meeting expectations, but in standing fully in your own truth. Solitude gives you that gift. It's not emptiness, it's fullness. It's where you learn that you are enough as you are. Many people are afraid of being alone because they equate it with loneliness, but loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of connection. And connection starts with yourself. If you can't sit with your own thoughts without feeling restless or uncomfortable, that's not because you need someone else, it's because you need to reconnect with yourself. Solitude is the pathway to that connection. When you stop resisting it, when you lean into the quiet and let yourself be present with your own thoughts, You discover a sense of peace that no amount of external validation can provide. This is why solitude is not something to avoid, it's something to seek out. It's not a state of lack, it's a state of abundance. Because when you are comfortable being alone, you stop fearing the loss of others. You stop grasping for attention and approval. You become whole, not because others are giving you something, but because you've found everything you need within yourself. That's the power of solitude. It's not isolation, it's liberation. And when you understand that, you'll never see being alone the same way again. When you strip away the distractions and sit with yourself, you begin to realize how much of your identity has been shaped by the expectations and opinions of others. We live in a world that constantly demands our attention. The noise of social media, the pressure to conform, the endless comparison to other people's lives, it all creates a false sense of identity. We start to define ourselves by how others see us, rather than who we truly are. But solitude gives you the space to dismantle that illusion. It allows you to step away from the noise and ask yourself, who am I when no one is looking? That's not an easy question to answer, but it's an essential one, because if you don't know who you are at your core, you'll always be searching for external validation to give you a sense of worth. When you spend time alone, you start to see the patterns of your own mind. You notice the thoughts that keep repeating themselves, the insecurities that surface, the narratives you've been telling yourself for years without questioning them. You begin to see how much of your self-worth has been tied to what others think of you. That realization can be uncomfortable, but it's also liberating, because once you recognize it, you have the power to change it. You no longer need to perform for the world. You can begin to live in alignment with your own values rather than the expectations placed on you. That's the gift of solitude. It reveals the truth of who you are beneath the layers of conditioning. It's easy to lose yourself when you're constantly surrounded by others, opinions, criticism, praise. It all shapes the way you see yourself. But the truth is, most people are projecting their own insecurities and fears onto you. Their judgment says more about them than it does about you. When you remove yourself from that environment and sit with yourself, you start to untangle what's truly yours from what's been imposed on you. You realize that you are not defined by other people's opinions. Their approval or disapproval doesn't change your inherent value. That's why solitude is so powerful. It strips away the external noise and lets you hear your own voice clearly for the first time. In solitude, you begin to discover your own values. When you step back from the constant input of other people's opinions and judgments, you create the space to ask yourself what really matters to you, not what society says should matter, not what your parents or friends expect from you, but what feels true to you on a deeper level. Maybe you've been chasing success because that's what you've been taught to value. But in solitude, you realize that success without fulfillment feels hollow. Maybe you've been seeking approval because you thought it would make you feel whole. But in solitude, you realize that true peace comes from accepting yourself, not from winning the approval of others. This is where strength begins to take root. When you define yourself by your own standards, rather than by the expectations of others, you become unshakable. The world can criticize you, misunderstand you, reject you, but it doesn't matter anymore, because you've already validated yourself. That's what solitude teaches you. It teaches you that your worth isn't conditional. It's not tied to how much praise you receive or how many people like you. Your value is intrinsic, and when you truly understand that, you become free. But this kind of self-awareness doesn't happen overnight. It requires patience and a willingness to sit with discomfort. In the beginning, the silence can feel deafening. Your mind will resist it. It will try to pull you back into distraction, back into seeking external validation. But if you stay with it, if you resist the urge to escape, you'll begin to uncover a deeper layer of truth within yourself. You'll realize that you don't need anyone else to tell you who you are. You already know. You've just been too distracted to hear it. Solitude clears away the noise so that you can finally listen. It's not about cutting people off or living in isolation. It's about learning how to be whole within yourself so that your relationships become stronger, not more fragile. When you stop depending on others to complete you, you approach relationships from a place of abundance rather than need. You no longer cling to people out of fear of being alone. You connect because you want to, not because you need to. That's the difference between healthy relationships and codependent ones. Solitude teaches you how to stand on your own so that you can meet others from a place of strength rather than emptiness. This is why embracing solitude is so powerful. It forces you to meet yourself without the mask you wear for the world. It teaches you how to sit with your thoughts, your fears, your desires, and find peace in that stillness. When you no longer fear being alone, you become untouchable. The world loses its power over you. You stop chasing validation because you've already found it within yourself. That's the kind of strength that can't be shaken by external circumstances. That's the strength you discover when you learn to sit with yourself in solitude. Loneliness has a way of magnifying our thoughts. When you're alone, the silence creates a space where your mind can run unchecked. Old regrets, mistakes, and painful memories tend to resurface when there's nothing to distract you. It's tempting to fill that silence with noise. Turn on the TV, scroll through your phone, reach out to someone just to avoid sitting with your thoughts. But the truth is, growth happens in the silence. When you allow yourself to sit with discomfort rather than running from it, you begin to understand it. That's where healing starts. It's not about avoiding pain, but about facing it head-on and understanding what it's trying to teach you. Most of us have been conditioned to think that negative emotions are something to be avoided. When we feel sadness, fear, or regret, we see it as a sign that something is wrong. But those emotions are not your enemy. They are messages. They are revealing parts of yourself that you've ignored or suppressed for years. Loneliness gives you the space to hear those messages clearly. When you sit with your pain instead of running from it, you begin to understand why it's there. Maybe you feel lonely because you've been neglecting your own needs. Maybe you've been surrounding yourself with the wrong people, seeking validation instead of true connection. Or maybe you've been avoiding dealing with a wound from your past, and it's finally coming to the surface. Loneliness forces you to confront those truths, not to punish you, but to free you. When you sit with your emotions, you begin to notice patterns. You start to see how certain thoughts keep showing up, how the same fears tend to surface in different situations. That's not a coincidence. It's your mind trying to protect you from pain. But the problem is that avoidance only makes the pain stronger. The more you resist an emotion, the more power you give it. If you feel sadness and try to push it away, it will come back with even more intensity. But if you sit with it, if you allow yourself to feel it without judgment, it begins to lose its grip on you. You start to see it for what it is, a passing wave, not a permanent state. This is where strength is built. When you learn to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it, you develop emotional resilience. You stop being afraid of your own thoughts. You stop seeking external distractions to avoid facing yourself. You realize that you are capable of handling difficult emotions, that they don't have to control you. That's the gift of solitude. It teaches you that you don't have to be afraid of your own mind. You learn that pain is not permanent, and neither is fear. You can sit with them, let them pass through you, and remain whole on the other side. But it's not easy. The mind will try to resist it. It will look for an escape, for something to numb the discomfort. You'll be tempted to distract yourself, to reach for something external to fill the void. but distraction only delays the healing process. The only way through it is to sit with it, to let the thoughts come, to let the memories surface, and to observe them without attaching to them. You are not your thoughts. You are not your past. You are the observer of those experiences. And when you realize that, you gain power over them. They no longer have the ability to define you. Loneliness is not just about physical isolation, it's about emotional separation from yourself. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely if you're disconnected from yourself. Solitude allows you to rebuild that connection. It gives you the space to understand yourself, to listen to your own thoughts and emotions without interference. You begin to notice what brings you joy, what drains your energy, what patterns keep repeating in your relationships. That self-awareness is what allows you to make different choices moving forward. You start to show up differently in your life, not as someone reacting to external circumstances, but as someone grounded in inner clarity. This is why solitude is so powerful. It teaches you that you don't need to fear your own mind. The thoughts, the emotions, the memories, they are not there to harm you. They are there to be understood. When you sit with them, you strip away the fear surrounding them. You begin to see them as information, not as threats. And when you do that, you take back control. You realize that you are not at the mercy of your emotions. You have the strength to face them, to understand them, and to let them go. Loneliness becomes a path to strength when you stop fighting it and start listening to it. When you stop seeing it as something to escape from and start seeing it as a teacher, it loses its power over you. You begin to understand that solitude is not emptiness, it's a blank canvas. It's a space where you can rediscover yourself, where you can confront the parts of yourself that you've ignored, and where you can build emotional strength from the inside out. That's the kind of strength that can't be taken away from you. That's the strength that comes from sitting with yourself and realizing that you are enough. We've been taught to see relationships as the ultimate solution to loneliness. Society tells us that if we're feeling alone, the answer is to reach out, to surround ourselves with people, to find someone who will fill the emptiness inside us. But that belief creates a dangerous trap. The idea that other people are responsible for making us feel whole. When you rely on others to complete you, you give away your power. You start to measure your worth based on how other people treat you, and when they disappoint you or walk away, you feel like you've lost a part of yourself. That's why learning to find strength in your own company is one of the most powerful things you can do. When you stop looking to others for validation and start finding it within yourself, you become unshakable. It's not that relationships aren't important. They absolutely are, but they're meant to enhance your life, not define it. When you expect other people to fill the gaps in your self-worth, you place an unfair burden on them. No one can carry the weight of your happiness for you. That's something you have to build from within. When you find peace in your own solitude, you shift the dynamic of your relationships. You stop approaching them from a place of need and start showing up from a place of wholeness. You stop looking for someone to fix you because you've already done the inner work. That's when you attract healthier connections, because you're not seeking someone to rescue you, you're seeking someone to walk beside you. Being comfortable alone doesn't mean cutting yourself off from others. It means understanding that your value isn't determined by how many people you have around you. There's strength in knowing that you are enough, even when you're standing alone. When you reach that place of inner confidence, you stop tolerating toxic relationships. You stop clinging to people who don't value you because you're no longer operating from a place of desperation. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you because you've already found that completion within yourself. That's freedom. That's strength. But getting to that place requires you to confront your fear of being alone. It requires you to stop distracting yourself with shallow relationships and empty conversations. It requires you to sit with yourself and ask, what am I really searching for? Most of the time, it's not about wanting someone else. It's about wanting to feel seen and valued. But you can give that to yourself. You can validate your own existence. You don't need someone else to tell you that you matter. You don't need someone else's approval to feel whole. That's the illusion we've been sold, that love from others is the ultimate source of happiness. But the truth is, love from others can never be a substitute for self-acceptance. Learning to stand strong in your own company teaches you how to build relationships from a place of strength rather than weakness. When you don't need someone to complete you, you stop compromising your values just to keep them around. You stop pretending to be someone you're not just to fit in. You stop allowing yourself to be mistreated because you fear being alone. That's why solitude is so powerful. It breaks the cycle of seeking external validation. It forces you to sit with yourself and ask, who am I without anyone else's influence? When you can answer that question confidently, you become untouchable. This doesn't mean relationships stop mattering, it means they stop controlling you. When you find peace in solitude, relationships become a choice rather than a necessity. You no longer stay in situations that drain you because you're no longer afraid of being alone. You stop chasing love that isn't reciprocated because you're not desperate to fill a void. You stop tolerating half-hearted effort because you know your own worth. That's why solitude creates freedom. It teaches you that you don't have to accept less than you deserve just to avoid being alone. You realize that being alone isn't the worst thing. It's being surrounded by people who make you feel alone that's unbearable. The relationships you build from a place of strength are different. When you approach others from a place of self-assurance, you're no longer seeking someone to fix you. You're seeking someone who complements you. You stop fearing rejection because you understand that rejection doesn't define your worth. If someone doesn't see your value, that's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their perception. And when you truly believe that, you stop trying to force connections that aren't meant for you. You walk away from people who don't align with you because you know that solitude is not a punishment. It's a form of self-respect. When you become comfortable with your own company, you gain clarity. You begin to see which relationships are truly meaningful and which ones are built on convenience or fear. You stop investing energy in people who drain you because you understand that your peace is more valuable than forced connection. You begin to understand that solitude is not about being disconnected, it's about reconnecting with yourself. It's about stripping away the noise and rediscovering your inner strength. When you reach that place, relationships stop being a source of anxiety and become a source of joy. You stop settling for half love and empty promises. You stop clinging to people who don't value you. And the best part, you stop being afraid of walking away because you know that being alone is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And when you carry that strength into your relationships, you create deeper, more authentic connection. You stop operating from fear and start operating from truth. That's the power of solitude. That's the freedom that comes from knowing that you are enough. When you embrace solitude, you begin to understand that it's not about removing yourself from the world. It's about finding strength within yourself so that you can engage with the world more authentically. Too often people fear solitude because they think it means isolation, but solitude and isolation are not the same thing. Isolation is disconnection, solitude is empowerment. When you cultivate the ability to stand alone, you gain the power to walk into any situation without being consumed by it. You stop being shaped by the energy of others and instead become a source of strength in your own right. That's why embracing solitude doesn't make you detached, It makes you more capable of meaningful connection. When you're comfortable with your own company, you develop a deeper understanding of yourself. You stop seeking approval because you've already validated your own existence. You stop needing constant reassurance because you've built an internal foundation that doesn't crumble when external circumstances shift. And from that place of inner strength, you start approaching the world differently. You stop adapting yourself to fit into spaces that aren't meant for you. You stop overextending yourself to be liked. You stop compromising your boundaries just to avoid conflict. When you're rooted in self-awareness, you stop looking to others to fill gaps that you've already closed within yourself. That's why solitude creates strength. It strips away the noise and allows you to hear your own voice clearly. The truth is, the world can be loud. Social media, opinions, criticism. It's easy to get lost in the chaos. It's easy to start defining yourself based on other people's judgments. But when you spend time alone, you create space to separate your truth from the noise. You begin to understand which thoughts are genuinely yours and which ones are projections from others. You start realizing that not every criticism requires a reaction, and not every rejection is a reflection of your worth. Solitude creates that space. It gives you the mental and emotional clarity to distinguish between what matters and what doesn't. And from that place of clarity, you learn to respond to life rather than react to it. That's the strength that comes from solitude. It's not about becoming emotionally closed off. It's about becoming emotionally independent. It's about knowing that your sense of self is not attached to the opinions or actions of others. When you reach that level of inner peace, you stop chasing relationships that drain you. You stop holding on to people who make you feel small. You stop fighting for love that isn't freely given. And the beautiful thing is that when you release those things, you make room for relationships that align with your true self. When you stop showing up with desperation, you start attracting people who see you clearly. That's the power of standing strong in your own company. You create a life where you are respected, valued, and seen, not because you're begging for it, but because you've learned to embody it. It's not always easy. Sometimes solitude will feel uncomfortable. Sometimes you'll sit with yourself and feel the weight of silence pressing down on you. That's where the growth happens. Most people run from that discomfort. They fill their days with noise, with distractions, with surface-level connections, because facing themselves feels too heavy. But if you have the courage to sit with that discomfort, to let it teach you rather than scare you, you come out the other side stronger. The discomfort of solitude is not a punishment, it's a lesson. It's teaching you to stop seeking fulfillment outside of yourself and start building it from within. And once you learn that, you become unstoppable. The strength you gain from solitude extends into every area of your life. When you stop fearing being alone, you make decisions differently. You stop settling for jobs that don't align with you because you're not making decisions from a place of fear. You stop forcing friendships that don't feel right because you're not desperate for connection. You stop tolerating disrespect in relationships because you know your value isn't tied to whether someone else approves of you. That's why solitude creates freedom. It teaches you that your peace isn't dependent on anyone else's behavior. You don't have to convince anyone to love you. You don't have to fight to be chosen. You already are enough. And the irony is that when you reach that place of inner peace, your relationships naturally improve. Because when you're not showing up with the weight of expectation, you create space for authenticity. You stop needing people to behave a certain way to feel secure. You stop taking things personally because you understand that other people's actions are a reflection of them, not you. That emotional independence makes you magnetic. When you no longer need others to make you feel whole, you attract people who align with your wholeness rather than your wounds. And those relationships become stronger because they're built on truth rather than fear. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can stand alone. It's not about closing yourself off, it's about knowing that you can face whatever life throws at you without losing yourself. That's why embracing solitude is so powerful. It teaches you that you don't have to be afraid of being alone. You don't have to fill the silence with noise. You don't have to seek constant validation to feel like you matter. You already matter. You already have everything you need within you. And when you reach that place, you realize that solitude was never the enemy. It was the path to strength. And once you've found that strength, you carry it with you into every corner of your life.